Okay, let's get right into it. I'm Jacob White, and this is my Lab 4 presentation. Introduction to Lab. In this lab, we are going to investigate and analyze the motion of a spring. To do this, I'm going to use the sample motion of a spring provided to us and use the program Tracker to analyze the motion. The position data gathered from Tracker can then be used to find values such as the spring constant, which can then be used to estimate the spring force and spring potential energy. The end goal is to get the model as close to the positional data from Tracker. In addition, the energies of the system will be calculated from the positional data and graphed to help understand the interactions in the system. This lab is important because it allows us to analyze the relationship between different energies, such as the gravitational potential energy and how they change during the motion of an object. This model was chosen because it allows us to easily visualize the different energies of the system and how they change. So here's the fundamental physics used. We have Hooke's law, kinetic energy, gravitational potential energy, spring potential energy, the momentum update formula, and the energy principle. And here is the Tracker video. So the initial conditions of the system. So we have the mass defined, the relaxed length of the spring, the period of oscillation, and the spring constant. And so the first equation, as we can see on the right, the first equation was used to find the spring constant, and the second equation was used to find the relaxed length of the spring. Okay, so now let's get into the coding. So first, the initial conditions in the code were changed to match the initial values measured from the Tracker video. Next, the values used in the spring equations needed to be defined. L was defined as the difference between the ball and spring positions, and L hat was then defined as L divided by its magnitude. S was defined as the difference between the magnitude of L and L naught, the relaxed length. After this, the energies, spring potential, kinetic and gravitational potential, and the changes in energies could be defined. Finally, the gravitational and spring forces were defined along with the net force, and the momentum principle was applied to update the motion of the system, just as we did in all of our other labs. So here are the two graphs that we got at the end with our model. So on the left, we can see the position versus time, where red is the Tracker data and blue is the model. And on the right, we can see the change in energy versus time, where red is the gravitational potential energy, blue is the kinetic energy, green is the spring potential energy, and orange is the total energy. And these are all the change in energy values. Data analysis. The Tracker and model positional data are very close to each other, as can be seen in the graph. This is true except for the troughs, where the model overpredicts the experimental data. This is likely due to an error in translating the motion to positional data in Tracker, and the unaccounted for force of drag. As can be seen in the Tracker data, the troughs start to lessen in amplitude as time passes, suggesting that the drag does have a significant effect on the data. The energy graph agrees with the positional data very well, as the spring potential energy peaks when the spring is furthest from its relaxed position. To improve the data and lab as a whole, the drag and friction forces should be accounted for. We should definitely do this in a future permutation of this lab. This will result in more accurate modeling of the positional data and result in a decrease in total energy of the system as it is lost to drag and friction. Is the energy principle satisfied? The energy principle states that the total amount of energy remains the same in a closed system. In my model system, this is satisfied, as can be seen in the energy graph. The change in total energy, the orange line, remains zero throughout the spring's motion, even though the other energies are constantly changing. However, in the experiment, the energy principle would not be satisfied, as there is an unaccounted for energy being lost to the surroundings in the form of friction and drag. My model does not account for this loss in energy. And finally, we'll end by talking about oscillation periods. To calculate the oscillation period for the spring, it is possible to use either the x positional data or the y positional data. Using the y positional data, I got 1.519 seconds, and using the x positional data, I got 1.633 seconds. For this lab, I decided to use the period from the y positional data because this value more accurately depicts the motion of the spring. When the spring is swaying from left to right in the x direction, the spring does not act like a true spring, as it is not physically constructed to do so. It only acts as a true spring when the coils are depressed in the direction of the orientation of the spring. So in this lab, the spring is orientated vertically, so we should use the y positional data in our calculations. And that is it. I'm done with my lab.